Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cumulus Solutions' first webinar. This webinar is going to be about cybersecurity and all of the tips that you can have when you work at home, when you're at work, and as you're traveling about. Obviously, we know these are some strange times, so a lot of people are working from home. So these tips will be great for everyone to take a closer look at what they're doing at home for cybersecurity. My name is Kyle Johnson. I'm the Director of Security Operations and Risk Management for Cumulus Solutions. I've been with the company for a few years now, have prior experience in security with higher education, as well as the financial industry. I also have Brian Manns with me. Brian, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Can't complain. My name is Brian Manns, Senior Info Security Engineer. I've been with Cumulus for a couple of years plus. Most of my IT experiences in infrastructure, wireless, firewalls, all that good stuff, and then a little bit of healthcare where we did some security, and now with Cumulus.
Oh, that's fantastic. So Cumulus is a cybersecurity consulting firm, and basically it provides organizations with access to the people, expertise, and technology that they need to assist them with developing and reviewing their information security programs. As we know, in this Northern Indiana region, there's really a lack of cybersecurity professionals. So what Cumulus is really trying to do is bring the best talent together to provide organizations with those resources that they can tap into and help with a slew of services for their cybersecurity programs. As you can see, we offer, our main thing that we offer is the controls and risk assessment, where we use industry standard frameworks to review and develop their information security program. We also have variants of those assessments where we can look at the CIS Top 20 and various frameworks as well. We also provide policy development, some virtual CISO. Brian heads up the vulnerability management, which I'm sure he will touch on later in this webinar, as well as employee awareness training, where we actually have a fully managed program to help train users. Especially in these times, we all know that that's one of the key things. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is that awareness factor. So we wanted to talk a little bit about phishing, and phishing right now is something that cyber criminals are really latching onto because of this whole pandemic that we're in. They know everybody's working from home, maybe more in a relaxed setting. All of those different factors can really come into play when we're talking about phishing, especially when an incident occurs. So we like to talk about the four W's. So number one is the who. Do you actually know the sender of who's sending you that email? A lot of times that, they're getting more and more sophisticated, so you actually it may look like you know who the person is. The next thing that we want to look at is the what. What is the actual subject of the email? Is it something that is part of your daily task or something that you would be really expecting from that person? So that combined with the who can really give some clues onto if this is a legitimate email or not. Another thing that we want to look at is, are they asking you to perform a task? So many times it takes an action for someone to actually compromise your machine. So this could be in the form of an attachment, a malicious link, those types of things where somebody could, is really trying to get you to do something. Another thing that we want to look at is the when. Is there urgency in the message? So a lot of times, we see these scams saying, oh, you're going to go to jail if you don't pay a certain amount of money in a given amount of time. That obviously can be a red flag, but it also inflicts panic on people to where, it's that instinct that we have as humans is like, oh no, I'm in trouble, let me fix it somehow. And those are where they can really get somebody very quickly. And then the last thing is the where. Where does the link or the attachment in some cases actually take you? So if it says it's from google.com, when you hover over the link, which is a tip, where does that actually take you? So those are four things that we can look at, and all of those in conjunction can help you really determine whether or not something is phishing. So what should you do in those situations? So number one is to slow down. we're all in a hurry in today's world, and we all have email and everything at our fingertips. So it's very important to slow down, actually read the entire message, understand what it says, and then make an educated decision off of that. Read the entire message. We see the email come through from the CEO that is demanding iTunes cards, and we basically stop right there. They need iTunes cards. Okay, before I even get done reading the email, I'm already at Walmart or CVS or someplace and buying the gift card. Slow down. Let's read the entire message. I had mentioned it before. Hover over the link. So if you take your cursor and you put it over the link in an email, that will actually show you exactly where that link is going. So if it says google.com in the actual email, and then you hover over it and it says badguy.com, those are probably not this, that's probably not the place that you want to go. So the last thing is simply think about it. Does the email make sense? So in those types of cases where you suspect phishing, and you receive an email, something like from the CEO asking for iTunes cards, does that actually make sense? Why would they be asking you to go out and buy, an iTunes card for them? Now, some cases that may be perfectly legitimate, but then the second part of most of those emails that we've seen is asking you to, send a picture of the back with the code scratched off. So right there, that makes that null and void once you do that and provide that code. So those are little things that you can pick up if it's from, asking you to change your password on a website or something like that. Really make sure that you have, either that website that you always go to bookmarked, so you know exactly where to go. So there's some little things that you can do as well to really you don't have to click on the link in the email. You can actually go to the website and really check things out for yourself. So I've given you these tips. So now let's look at an actual example of this. So this looks like it's coming from Apple. It's talking about a recent download. So let's go through those 4 W's. Number 1, who. So it shows that at the very top that it is from Apple. This looks like it's from no reply at purchases-apple.com. So looks fairly legitimate at first, right? So it's also from Apple at the very bottom. It says, well, at least it says it's from Apple, right? However, in the 2, it's, it says it's to me, but it's also very generic. It says, dear customer. Now, sometimes generic is okay, but some other times coupled with all of these different things in an email, the dear sir, dear ma'am, all of those little things, somebody may not address you that way. And, it could really be cause for concern. So let's look at this at the very top. Your account has been used to make purchases in iTunes. So number 1, this can kind of inflict some panic on somebody if, they haven't logged into their Apple account in a very long time. They're obviously out money because it's talking about it's a purchase. So when somebody loses money, that's never a good thing. Another thing that we can look at is, what are they asking you to do? They recommend you going to that website right there. So while we can see that it says apple.com, if you take a closer look, those dashes in between there don't separate that link. So report-fraud-apple.com is actually the full URL that it's going to. So that is the full website that someone is going to go to if in this case. And obviously we can see that is not apple.com. And if you look at the very top again, in the from section, we can also see a dash in there as well, talking purchases-apple.com. So those are some dead giveaways as well. I guess another dead giveaway would be if you don't have an Apple account, then this would obviously be something to look at. But another thing that we had talked about too was the urgency factor. It's 24 hours. It's within, just a few days, you're going to go to jail. Those types of things that can really set off to where people are kind of in an uh-oh mode and then not think straight when they're trying to read an email. So just slow down, take your time when you're reading some of these things, an extra 10, 15 seconds reading the whole message, can really go a long way, not only to save you, but it can save your family some hassle, and then it can also save a whole bunch of time and resources at your work. So with this, I want to toss it over to Brian, where he is going to talk a little bit more about some passphrases and passwords that you can practice.
Passwords. We've all have them. We've had them since the beginning of the internet, and I'm assuming I don't see us getting rid of them anytime soon. Now, most people will have passwords that has something to do with family, have something to do with maybe a dog, anniversary dates. I'm going to tell you, don't do that. Social media is online, and being that you may take a picture of your cat, your dog, and say, hey, I got Rusty in 2008. Well, that could be your password to some of your logins. So we want to make our passwords long, complex, and not able to be gathered by personal information. The longer, the better, the more complex. When I was at a cybersecurity conference, the conversation had come up during the presentation that a 12-character password can be cracked in 10 minutes. So if that tells you 10 minutes, it takes them only 10 minutes to crack it, the longer the better. You probably might want to go towards the sides of 20, especially if it's a high-end account, such as maybe your banking, something that's got sensitive information, or your credit card information or Social Security. Use characters or phrases from a favorite book. So basically, don't take, like, little Teddy Ruxpin, a character, and just put in little Teddy Ruxpin. You got to change it up. You got to add things to it so that that passphrase is secure, because these types of characters or phrases can be cracked if you don't mix it up a little bit. Use different password for each account. Why? I can't remember 2 passwords, let alone each account that I have. A great example of this is Netflix was hacked, and all the passwords were compromised. We suffered this personally on my wife's account, as somebody was accessing Netflix from India. Now, move forward, Disney Plus comes out, and those passwords that were lifted from Netflix were used on Disney Plus accounts. So if you have or know of an organization that has been breached and you use the same password across many different accounts, you have to change all of those passwords for those accounts. That's why if you use a different password for each account, one account becomes compromised, you don't have to go, well, I got to change the 150 accounts that I have out there on the internet, plus my work password, because they're all the same. You don't want to do that. You kind of want to have that different password mentality. Now, how am I going to remember all those passwords? What am I going to be able to write them down on a piece of paper? No, that's not best practice either. Password managers, such as LastPass. There's also OnePass out there. Pick your poison. LastPass is free for personal use. If you're an organization, it is relatively cheap and can be centrally managed. So if somebody were to leave your company, you will have their passwords to the accounts that they've created underneath there, so that access to that pertinent information is accessible. An example of a good password is, as you see, I love Star Wars. Well, I do. I'm more of a Darth Vader guy myself, but see how the password's mixed up. You got an exclamation point at the beginning, and capital letters are used in the middle. They could also be used at the beginning. You want to mix that up depending on your password. Some of the vowels are replaced with a zero and an @ symbol. The S is replaced with a $sign. So you can remember this. This is something that for those who are troubled with memorization, oh man, what was my password? What did I make that? Oh yeah, I love Star Wars. And then you just work through the which character did I change. But the great news is if you have a password manager, you don't have to remember every single password for every single account, okay? Now, having a LastPass, you may, being that this is all the eggs in one basket, you may want to have a little thing turned on, which is what we call multi-factor or two-factor authentication. What is it? It's basically something you know, which is your password, something you are, something you have. So something you have is your phone, which you can download Google Authenticator apps. That's the something you have. The something you are, that's when you get into the biometrics of it. Iris scans, not that we've got too many of those. Fingerprint scans, a lot of devices out there that have that. Or, you know, or texting, getting those texts that, hey, here's your code for this, to get into it. Two factors is very important because let's say one of your accounts is breached. As long as you have the two factor, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for an attacker to get into that account. Now, if your machine's been compromised, understand, I'm telling you, this will make it more difficult. It's not going to make it not possible, because there's always the potential. If you're on your machine and you click on one of those emails that Kyle's talking about, you may have somebody who's sitting on your machine, and if you're sitting there authenticating with your two-factor, that is a possible workaround for attackers. So it's not perfect, but if they're coming from it from, you know, Iran or North Korea, those countries, and they're trying to log into that account and they don't have that two-factor, they're not going to get in. They may have your password, but they're not going to get in. The other thing that, you know, when we're talking about keeping your, you know, computer safe. Now, if we don't want somebody, you know, you clicking on something and, you know, they got ownership of that machine, we want to talk about software updates. Software updates are very important. They come out left and right. Recently, Microsoft, in the month of April, come out with 113 knowledge-based patches. 3 of them are exploitable. And I can tell you that if you go out to exploit-database.com, a little too high for this webinar, but you can find those exploits already out there. Windows, Mac OS, your iPhone. Now, obviously, the iOS, it doesn't update nearly as much as, you know, a Mac OS or Windows does. Windows, by far, the one who is on a monthly, you know, first Tuesday of the month, you have to update. The other thing that's constantly updated, you turn around, you blink, it's your browsers. Don't leave those open all 24/7. You want to close them every now and then. And so that way, if there are any updates, you can get those updates, especially for something like Firefox. Now, Chrome, you have to manually update. You go into settings, go about, and it'll show you the updates, and it'll automatically update once you get into that setting. The thing about patching is it prevents those vulnerabilities that I just talked about, those 113 with the 3 being exploitable. If you have it patched, it's harder to get into your network, harder for that exploit to operate. Now, there has been some thought process beforehand is, well, I don't want to install that update because what if it breaks my machine? And in today's world, you have to ask yourself 1 or 2 questions when we're dealing with cybersecurity. Do I want it down because I got a bad patch, or do I want it down because somebody exploited it and it encrypted my data or deleted the data? So you have to ask yourself those questions, and, you know, and say, is this risk acceptable to our organization? most point, I come from the mindset, I'd rather have it down because it has a bad patch. I know I can roll that patch back, okay? Now, excuse me, you will want to restart your machines on at least bare minimum on a monthly basis, because if you aren't restarting those machines, you're not letting those Windows updates apply to your machine. The other thing as well, another thought process is if you're working from home and you have a Windows machine, just don't leave it on 24/7, okay? Understand if it's connected to that network, that it can also be connected to from a remote network. So when not using it, go ahead, shut it down. If it's not connected to the network or internet, the bad guys can't connect to it either, all right? Personal and work devices. You don't want to mix business pleasure. The thing with devices, you don't want your kids on your work devices. You don't want your personal devices mixing that into, because if one gets infected, the other one as well could be infected as well. Talking about that, you can separate those types of devices by using a secure Wi-Fi. Do things, set up a guest Wi-Fi. Do you have a friend in your close, tight-knit group that likes to click on everything? Well, it says I could get a deal on this, or click on to see that. Yeah, I've got them, and they're frequent flyers in the, hey, can you take a look at this? And you may want to separate them from your personal devices and work devices that you have on your home network, okay? Something else you're gonna wanna separate as well is the Internet of Things. Let's say your Nest thermostat, your Nest cameras, those types of devices, they're tough to secure because you really don't have that much control over them, because they're operated on like kind of an automated basis. You log into it, you have a password. Do you have two-factor set up on those? No. So there's a potential that somebody could get on it and then relay to those devices on your network. So separate those devices from your personal laptops, your Macs, your work devices, so that you don't have that situation arise. Use a VPN. If you're working from home, you want to use VPN back to the network. Use the strength of a secured network, the enterprise firewalls that they have, so that your data is encrypted and protected, and your work device isn't just going everywhere it can. It's not under the protection of the enterprise network. Change the default passwords on your home router. Why is this important? Because admin is not a secure way to log into a device. Those default passwords are on sites like Asus, Linksys, Netgear, and if we can get to them, they can get to them, and I mean by they, the attackers, okay? Change it to something long. This is a pretty important password, because if I can get into your home router, I may be able to set up a VPN back to you, to that device. And if I'm on VPN to your home router, I'm on your personal network at that point, and I can see anything I want to, all right? So very important. Update your firmware. If you're not updating your firmware, you're putting yourself at risk to be exposed. A lot of things can happen, like exploiting it, getting control of the firewall, using your firewalls as adding it to a botnet so that you can perform distributed denial of services where you take out a website. Little high technical talk there. Use web filtering. Web filtering, yeah, well, it's just me and the wife. Yeah, but if you put in web filtering, it will help block the low hanging fruit, so to speak, the risque sites, the adult sites, those types of things. You don't want to go to have that on, because you go to a website maybe that's having some issues and it redirects you to a risque site, it will block it. And those risque sites are commonly known to have a lot of malware on them. So be very careful. Now, besides, your home Wi-Fi, home router, there's all kinds of nice things that vendors like Asus, Netgear add to your home Wi-Fi router that will help you. Some of them are intrusion prevention systems. What that does is if it doesn't like it, it zaps it, and that connection to whether it be Russia or China at that point will just drop, okay? Then I know not Netgear, but Asus has a infected machine. It will detect that a machine on your network is going out to a bad site and trying to connect, and they're trying to lift your information. It will notify you of such issues. Now, Netgear also uses a thing called OpenDNS, and you can use OpenDNS anywhere on any home router Wi-Fi device. So that's another solution that you may want to look into. And if you're not technical, don't hesitate to friend a IT person or get your 16, 17-year-old, say, hey, you probably understand this better than I do. You work all day getting around it at the local school. Why not help me set this up? But most importantly, we're here to help you protect your data. And with that, we'll move back to Kyle.
Oh, absolutely. Those are some great tips. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is that information security is everyone's responsibility. It doesn't matter if you are working from home, if you're at work, if you're out at the local coffee shop that has free Wi-Fi. Take security seriously. It's everybody's duty to protect the data that they have on their phones, their work machines, their personal devices, because it's not a matter of if something is going to happen. It's a matter of when, and just how bad is it going to be when something like that actually happens. So there could be financial consequences for your family if something were to happen to your machine. Bigger things like ransomware can take over a whole organization. All of those things. So it's very important that everyone takes information security seriously. We're all sharing data between people, so be very cautious when you're sending emails. Make sure it's the right person. Don't send anything that is super sensitive, such as a social security number, excuse me, a date of birth, credit card information, all of those different things. Don't ever send that unencrypted in an email. So a lot of times your organization will have a means of encrypting that email from encrypting it from the time it's sent from your machine to the time they get it on the other end. In between there, that will be encrypted. So it allows, it masks what's in that email, and it really helps not letting the attacker see into that email and intercept that data. So all of those little things, check with your organizations, ask them, hey, do we have encrypted email? Do we have a means of doing that if I have to send something? If not, look at other ways, such as certain file share websites that are secure. Those types of things can really go a long way. And like Brian had talked about before, separate between a personal and a work machine. Don't let your 3-year-old be playing games and watching a whole bunch of YouTube videos on your work machine, because something like that, one wrong click, then they could have access into your work machine, all of that sensitive data. Think about all the data that you have access to from your work. All of those little things can really compromise an entire organization. So it's very important now more than ever, especially since we're kind of in that relaxed environment at home, to really pay attention to information security and stop the bad guys where they're at. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions, if we can help out in any way. Once again, we have employee awareness training, some of the different assessments. we can be contacted at info@cumulussolutions.com. Feel free to visit our website. All of our pictures are on the website to get a feel for the team. We have all of our information on there as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But this would be a really good way as we're all working from home to get in touch with us, and we're working nonstop helping organizations secure themselves. So Brian, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, rest of their week, and join us again in a couple of weeks for our next webinar. Thank you.